Everyone, my name is Catherine Winter. I am the founder of Ride Equisafe. I am so happy to be with you today. A little bit about us. We basically started doing what we do because we found that there wasn't a great place to research all of your different safety options. And so our goal has been to carry the broadest selection of equestrian safety equipment across all of North America. That includes air vests, body protectors, safety stirrups that don't look like safety stirrups, as well as air vest compatible clothing. And part of the idea is that we wanted to really be able to educate people on all of the different product types so that they could make an informed decision. But also we wanted to be brand agnostic. We didn't want to just carry one or two brands that people felt like they were getting pushed into. Rather, we wanted to carry as much as possible so people could make the best decision for themselves. And as we've been doing this, what we've really seen is that, especially in the hunter jumper market, the idea of body protection is somewhat new. And we are seeing a lot of people choose to go into air vests. We are certainly seeing some that are going into body protectors, but air vests certainly seem to be the item of choice for the hunter jumper market. In the eventing market, this is something that they're very familiar with. They've been using body protection for a very long time. In fact, they're required to use it. So what we really wanted to do today was to really solicit some questions and some myths that people have heard about or believe in themselves to be able to say, yes, that's actually true, or no, that's actually a myth, and here's why. So we did go ahead and solicit some questions yesterday on our Facebook and Insta pages, and we got a good list of ones to get started with. But you are more than welcome to use the question feature here and ask questions as we go along, and happy to do our best to be able to answer them. So, to get started with, I have another screen here to my right. So very first question that we very commonly get is, will the sound of the air vest going off spook my horse? And while certainly we can never say that, no, absolutely not, it will not spook your horse, the majority of times it either doesn't spook them at all, or if it does, they have kind of a quick startle reaction like this, and then that's it. It certainly doesn't usually cause them to bolt or run or kick out. Certainly some people have horses that are very sound sensitive, but 9 times out of 10, the horses actually don't seem to notice, and it's the rider that is more apprehensive about the sound. Part of it also is that it happens so incredibly quickly that the horses don't really have a chance to react to it. Again, it's usually the rider that's more surprised, and if anything, the horse is usually in shock that the rider isn't where they're supposed to be. And frankly, by the time that you're falling, the sound of the air vest is probably the least of your worries. So we did post a video a few weeks back just of one rider intentionally setting off her air vest just to test it with her horse, and the horse really did not flinch. But we've put together a longer compilation video that we will post on our YouTube channel, and we will also post on our Insta and Facebook channels as well, just so you can see kind of the range of reactions that we typically see. None of them is really a huge reaction to the air vest going off itself. So the second question that we get a lot is, what if I get jumped loose, get jumped out of the tack, get left behind? So one of the things here to think about is that, again, the eventing scene, that community has been wearing body protection and air vests for a very long time. And if you think about one of the things that they commonly do going cross country is they have to drop down into water. And any good eventing rider, if you see pictures or video of them doing that, they are leaning way back. because they certainly don't want the horse to land in the water and for the rider to be kind of in front of the horse and then risk coming off, falling forward of the horse. So an air vest lanyard should be set to where you can get jumped loose and you can get left behind without the air vest triggering. Now, if you're getting left behind to where you're landing behind the saddle, you probably have different things to worry about. And in that case, your air vest may very well trigger. If you're getting jumped loose 2 feet out of the saddle, again, you probably have bigger things to worry about. And in that case, your air vest might deploy. But on your saddle strap and your lanyard, which I have a couple of examples of them here, this is the pretty standard saddle strap and lanyard that you see for the majority of your air vests. Your lanyard is a bungee, so you have stretch there. And your saddle strap is also adjustable. You can make it longer or shorter in terms of how you install it on your saddle. So you do want to make sure that it's adjusted correctly when you start using it. Because again, you should have enough give that you can get jumped a little bit loose, you can get left behind, and the air vest isn't going to trigger. Third question we get a lot is, what happens if I forget to unclip before dismounting? I tend to chuckle because that one is a very frequent question, and I can almost guarantee you that it will happen. Usually it happens once and somebody is very irritated that they have just wasted a canister and they have to put a new canister in. Depending on the model of air vest that you're in, those canisters range from $30 to $50 on average. So usually one time of forgetting to unclip will cause people to remember the next time. But if you are jumping off and you're average size on an average size horse, your air vest is probably going to deploy. I've certainly seen a number of circumstances where somebody is halfway off and they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to unclip. And then they're holding on to their horses and trying to slide down and unclip at the same time. If your horse isn't that tall or you are tall, you might be able to land if it's a soft landing and have that bungee stretch out and not deploy your air vest. But if you're jumping off like you normally would and you're on a tall horse or you're petite, it's probably gonna trigger. But from what you'll see in the videos that I will share, your horse probably isn't going to think much of it, to be honest. You will probably think more of it than your horse does. So another question that we got in, air vests are expensive. So we are not going to say they're not. They are an investment and they should be seen as an investment just like any of your other equipment. We spend a lot of money on saddles. We spend a lot of money on bridles. We spend a lot of money on custom boots. What you typically see is good certified air vests are going to range between $500 to $950. Most of them are in the $550 to $750 range. So it is an investment. And then you have the ongoing investment of having to replace your canisters as well when you deploy your air vest. Certainly, if you were in a position where that is not something that is possible, then I would strongly encourage you to consider a body protector instead. The cost of entry for a body protector is significantly less than an air vest, and you don't have the ongoing cost of the canisters as well. And there are, in fact, things that a body protector can do from a safety perspective that are better than what an air vest can do, and vice versa. So I've certainly talked to some people that have said, well, if I can't get into an air vest, then there's no point in me wearing anything at all. And I really disagree with that statement. You are much better off doing some sort of protection than nothing at all. So if you're trying to figure out how to make some sort of protective equipment work, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We can talk about the different options and what your priorities are in terms of safety to figure out how to get you into equipment that will help you be safer when you ride. I was doing a fitting at a barn last week and somebody actually made an interesting statement about this. They said, well, I thought that the air vest was really expensive, but then I looked at my deductible for my health insurance, and my deductible is significantly more than the cost of the air vest, and that's how they justified the purchase. And it is a good way to think about it. It's cheaper than an ambulance ride and cheaper than an ER visit. So that still doesn't mean it's something to blink at, but it is the reality. So another question, we talked a little bit earlier, I mentioned about the eventers and how the eventers are pretty used to safety equipment. So what the eventers are required to wear is the body protector. Sometimes it's called the rigid body protector. They are not required to wear air vests. I would say that especially if you're looking at the higher levels, the FEI levels, the majority of people are wearing both. So they can't choose either or in eventing going cross country. They have to wear the body protector at a minimum. And then the air vest is bonus. There's a few reasons why that's the case. One, I don't know if any of you have ever watched an upper level eventing cross country course, but those jumps, a lot of them do not move. They're certainly making fantastic advances in making those jumps safer and using frangible pins and other types of release technology so that when the horses hit those jumps that they actually do move and do fall so that the horses can recover. But because those types of falls, riders are either falling on a jump, so I would call that a pinpoint impact injury that could occur. A body protector is actually going to disperse shock much more effectively if somebody is landing directly on a jump. The other thing that you have to keep in mind with eventers is that sometimes because of the fences that they are jumping and the speed at which they are jumping them, they have rotational falls at a frequency that is much greater than other disciplines of riding. So when I talk about a rotational fall, it's that a horse doesn't get its forelegs out of the way quickly enough up into jumping position, and they might hit the jump in the upper forearm, and that causes them to somersaults. And so that is, the somersault is what we call a rotational fall. And with that type of fall, sometimes the riders are not separating from the horse. And that is a key component of what makes an air vest work, is that you are snapped to your saddle, and when you separate from your horse, a lanyard pulls a key ball out of the trigger mechanism of the air vest, which pierces the compressed CO2 cartridge, and that's what blows your vest up. So in order for it to work, you have to separate from your horse. In the scenario of a rotational fall, you might not actually be separating. So an air vest, if you're not separating, does you no good whatsoever. And that is another reason why the body protector is required in that circumstance. Now, in the hunter jumper realm, or trail riding, endurance, dressage, we don't see those rotational falls as frequently. They do happen, but they are much, much less frequent than in eventing. So that's why the eventers are required to wear that rigid body protector. One of the other questions that we get a lot is, where is the research? People are really interested in data and research regarding air vests. And truth be told, we don't have a lot of equestrian specific data. I might also add, we don't have a lot of data on body protectors either. Yet for some reason, people don't tend to ask us about the data with body protectors. And I think part of the reason is because they've been around for a really long time. People are used to wearing them, especially in the eventing market. They have seen them work over time because they've been worn for so long. There certainly is no brand to brand comparison with body protectors. And in fact, that doesn't exist for helmets either. Currently, there is a huge fundraising push, and it's seen really good traction to be able to do that type of study with helmets. So, in fact, we don't have great in use data on the helmet side either, but hopefully that is going to change soon. We're in the exact same boat with air vests. What we do have with air vest is lab data, lab testing, crash test testing that has been done on those air vests. It is part of their certification process. So if you go to www.rideequisafe.com, you will see along the top, along the banner, we actually have a section for research and articles, and you'll be able to find some of those studies that have been done in the labs showing the difference that an air vest can make in terms of shock, trauma, force, etc. What we really need to be able to do a live study, if you will, is funding. And as we've seen in trying to just do the helmet research, the funding is expensive. For the helmets, they're looking for, I believe it's $500,000 to be able to fund that research. And so we would need the same thing to study body protectors and air vests to get the equestrian standard information. But it's not that we don't have data, we do, it's lab data. The other issue that we have with collecting data of this sort is that it's really hard to set a control group. In any true, really scientific research, you need a control group, but when you're dealing with horses and riders in combination, horses that have different levels of experience, riders that have different level of experience, different fences, different venues, different footing, all of these different factors that come into play, it's really hard to define a control group that you are measuring against. So that's one of the challenges that we kind of need to figure out in the process of looking at how can we gather more data. So another question that actually came in through our Facebook post is that they have heard that an air vest has not appropriately been tested to a woman's frame. And that's actually one that I haven't heard before, so I was really interested in that question. But I'm going to combine that question with another one that we got around, how do air vests inflate? Do they inflate inward or outward? And especially if you talk to an eventer, this is something that they are very focused on because they've heard a lot about inward versus outward inflation. So when you're looking at an air vest, the way that they inflate is always against the area of least resistance. So what I find especially for women is that the section from the chest up to the shoulder and collarbone, there tends to be more gapping there just based on our anatomies. And so in that area, for example, you might see an air vest inflate inwards to fill that gap. But where you have air vests sitting flush, so maybe against, your shoulder blades or against your ribs, if the air vest is sitting right against you, then you would see that air vest inflate outwards. So the truth is that air vests inflate in multiple different directions, but always in the direction of least resistance. So if women, for example, are concerned about the chest area and having an air vest really smush them in that area, if your air vest is snug fitting across your chest, then it would inflate more so outwards. So we have a question or a comment coming in. Susan, hi, how are you? Says, when I forgot to unhook my Equivest and hopped off my saddle, the vest was thankfully not deployed, but now I worry that it won't deploy if I need it. Does the activation of the vest require a sharp break from the saddle? So that's a great question. So any trigger system on an air vest is based on pounds of pressure. So there has to be a certain amount of pressure that is put on that lanyard that forces that key ball to come out. And so it's one of the reasons, for example, that when you watch some of the videos of people trying on their air vest, it takes a couple of yanks to be able to pull the key ball out of the trigger, because you don't want it coming out easily. If it came out easily, then you would be deploying every time you got jumped loose or every time you got left behind. So it does require a certain amount of force. The majority of vests, it's 70 pounds of pressure. So that's why I referred to earlier, if you forget to unclip, if you're just kind of slowly sliding down your horse, that lanyard will stretch, and hopefully you're avoiding the 70 pounds of pressure on that key ball. But if you are pushing yourself away from your horse and doing like a really aggressive dismount, you should be creating enough pressure to actually deploy your vest. The other thing I would say is look at your lanyard. Have you been using it for a long time? Is it stretched out? How old is your vest? And when is the last time that you had it serviced or looked over? So the majority of brands, it varies a little bit between different brands, but the majority of brands recommend that you send your vest back to the manufacturer at least once a year or every 6 deployments to check it and make sure that it is working correctly. So they'll make sure that the trigger system is working correctly, that all of the air chambers are intact. Helite has been really interesting in their approach because they've actually provided a video for how you can do your own inspection versus sending it in. But their product is warranted for 4 years. So if you're unsure about something that you find or would just have better peace of mind to send it in, then you can definitely do that to ensure that everything is working properly. But one sure-proof way to do it is to just, when you're standing there, have a friend yank on the lanyard for you and yank on it hard to make sure that it'll come loose and that your air vest will blow up. So there are certainly circumstances where you should be able to dismount without it necessarily going off. And again, another such scenario is if you happen to be taller, your horse happens to be shorter, you might be able to get away with it, but it does require a certain amount of force. Another question that we got in is, will I be able to breathe when it goes off, or will I feel completely claustrophobic? So you definitely have a bunch of air that is surrounding you. You are now the Michelin man when you've got your vest inflated. Because again, your vest shouldn't strictly be inflating inwards, it's definitely going to feel tight. There is no way around that. You're going to feel a lot tighter than when it wasn't deployed, but it shouldn't be so tight or inflate with such force that you feel like you're having the wind knocked out of you and that you can't breathe. That certainly should not be the case. The other thing with every major certified air vest on the market is they start deflating on their own fairly quickly after they inflate, because again, the real purpose of an air vest is for impact, that you're falling off, you're landing on something, and you have cushion when you do that, a little bit of bounce, kind of like falling on an air mattress. But once that moment of impact is done, then there's no reason for the air vest to remain inflated. So you definitely want to be buying an air vest that self-deflates. Either they have a bleed valve on them or the canister and trigger is set to start deflating. And in fact, the majority of air vests on the market, there's really nothing that you have to do to get them to deflate or put them back together. After a few minutes, all the air will be out of them. If there's any remaining air left, the easiest thing to do is just remove the canister. Once you remove the canister, then all the air is definitely going out. But you really shouldn't feel like you can't breathe or that you've gotten the wind knocked out of you when the air vest deploys, but it is going to feel tight. And if, for example, you're claustrophobic, that sensation is probably going to be even a little bit more pronounced. Another comment we got, or a myth, is that a vest is going to interfere with your riding. So if a vest is fitted properly, whether it is a traditional eventing style vest like the one that I've got behind me, or some of the newer styles that are designed to look like a piece of clothing, that would be the Horse Pilot Air Vest as well as the Helite Zip-In 2. They really should not interfere with your riding. They should feel like another article of clothing. Some of them are heavier or a little bit bulkier than others, but that shouldn't interfere with how you're riding. You're not having to position yourself or move your arms in a way where you're moving around the vest. If anything, it might help you sit up a little bit straighter, depending on how snug the fit is meant to be, which differs from brand to brand. It is another piece of clothing, if you will. It's another piece of equipment, so it does take a little bit of getting used to for some people, but it absolutely shouldn't interfere with your riding. Many of the air vests on the market, the trigger and canister is like a tall oblong tube. And some people feel that because it sits like halfway between your belly button and your side. So some people really notice that that's there, but in reality, that shouldn't be interfering with how your arms move. If it is interfering with how your arms move, then it begins to make me really think about what are you doing with your arms for a canister that is, positioned in that place for it to interfere. And that then becomes a different kind of question that I would ask. So it really should not interfere with your riding. I would say that the biggest thought I have on that is the lanyard and how is the lanyard set. So as I mentioned earlier, you want the lanyard to have enough give that you can get jumped loose or that you can get left behind, but it certainly shouldn't be so loose that it's flapping around and that you're risking getting, your hand caught in it when you're moving your hands around. When you're riding normally, the lanyard usually just lays, on your lap basically, but you don't want it so loose that it's bouncing around and you're risking getting your arm in it. And the last question that we got from our post yesterday, and this is actually one of my favorite ones, is I get a lot of people that say, oh, well, I bought this to ride it, to ride in at shows, or I got this just to jump at home, but I'm not going to wear it when I go hacking, or I'm not going to wear it in this circumstance or that. So obviously you have the choice to use your air vest whenever you feel it's appropriate, but I encourage people to use their body protection, whatever is available to them, anytime they ride. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people that were just on a trail ride and the horse was walking and caught his toe on something and tripped and fell. And then the rider fell and was unfortunately injured. I've had people tell me that they do far riskier things at home when they're practicing because they want things to be easy at a horse show. So their training program is we do the tough things at home so that they're not tough at the show. And that is a perfectly logical approach to training and competing. But especially if you're doing riskier things at home, why not wear your protective equipment at home? So what I always tell people is, you never know when and if something is going to happen. So your best protection is to wear your protection all the time. It shouldn't matter if you're walking, it shouldn't matter if you're jumping, if you're flatting, whatever the case may be. I always encourage people to wear things whenever they can. So that takes up all of the questions that we had posted on social media. If anybody has any additional questions that they'd like to ask, feel free to pop them into the comment bar. Would love to see what your common questions are. If you're wondering if something is a myth or truth, you are always more than welcome to contact us either by Facebook, by Instagram. You can reach out to us through our website as well. We have a chat feature on the website. You can email us at info@rideequisafe.com. or you're always welcome to call us as well at 919-404-9744. Thanks so much for joining. I'm hoping that this was helpful in either validating some of the myths that you had heard or debunking them. And hope to stay safe, everyone. See you on our next ride.